Hi guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have an episode of This Year in Perfume, and we're going to go back in time to one of my favorite years of perfumery. This is where we enter my very favorite decade, and that's the decade of the 1980s. This is going to focus on the year of 1980 and some of the perfumes that I have in my collection that were created in the year 1980, and we're really kind of getting into the meat and potatoes of some of the fragrances that I love. Some of these you've seen before, some of them you have not. But before we hop into it, let's talk a little bit about the year of 1980. So the year of 1980 actually started with a couple disasters, if you will, man-made and natural. Number one was the eruption of Mount St. Helens. I remember my father telling me that he was in the university at the time. He went to Syracuse, and that he actually woke up to ash on his car from the eruption of Mount St. Helens. He graduated in the year 1980, if I'm not mistaken. And then I was born 5 years later. And also the assassination of John Lennon happened in the year 1980. If you were around, it probably seems like yesterday, just like 9/11 probably seems like yesterday to, people like me. And then some of the top grossing movies were Stir Crazy and Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. And then some of the big hits, there was Funky Town, Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 by Pink Floyd, Crazy Little Thing Called Love by Queen, Magic by Olivia Newton-John. So as you can see, there are some real classics from the year 1980, and perfumery was no different. But before we get into the 1980 perfumes, I want to talk about my scent of the day, as usual, as is becoming customary. Let me wipe this off because this is a serious fingerprint magnet. This is a tester bottle that I bought. This is a discontinued fragrance, go figure. I love my discontinued fragrances, and this is a fragrance called Versace Man. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a cap, but I do have the advantage of the notes on the back, because this is a tester bottle. So let me read you the notes. They're actually really interesting. You get narrowly bergamot from Calabria, black pepper in the top. In the heart, you get saffron and cardamom. And then in the bottom, as they call it, you get amber living tobacco leaves. I don't know if that's just marketing or what. And then you get labdanum cysts and cashmere woods. Now, cashmere woods is spelled with a K here. Let me just do a fresh spray since it is my scent of the day. And kind of just tell you what I get. This is a designer. And this used to be a cheapie. I've got a little bit of a dry down on the right hand, fresh spray on the left hand. So let me just tell you a little bit about what I get. There's also a note of Angelica listed on Fragrantica. Oh yeah, Angelica flowers is listed here as well. Now, when you look at Fragrantica, you'll see something called cashmere woods. And that sounds fancy, but it's not. It's not a material found in nature. It's a synthetic accord, and you get a ton of it in this fragrance. You get a ton of this cashmere iso-y super thing going on. Fragrantica says tobacco, but here it says tobacco leaves, and I kind of get the tobacco leaf reference a little bit more. You don't get that fine tobacco like you do in other fragrances that feature the note of tobacco. You also get a really big hit of saffron and cardamom. And because of the narrowly in the top in the beginning right now, since I just sprayed, the narrowly is very prominent with the pepper in the beginning. And it almost, starts out too sweet. For the first 30 seconds, it's a fragrance you would not think that I would like and enjoy because it's too sweet. But that sweetness tends to tone down. Now, this got discontinued. The flanker to this, Versace Man Eau Fresh, which comes in like this light baby blue bottle, is the one that ended up being a hit that they, that took off and, is still being made today while this one is discontinued. I don't like too many Versace fragrances. Probably my favorite Versace fragrance is actually this, Versus, which came out in 1991. If I'm not mistaken. Versace Man, which I'm wearing today, came out in 2003. So the one that came out a decade earlier, I actually like more because this has that late 80s, early 90s sunshine feel to it that just makes me so happy every time. Fragrances like this, Heritage, Jazz, Scotta Pour I just feel so at home with this time frame of fragrances. So this is my favorite Versace, but this is still good. This used to be a cheapie. You used to be able to get this for 30 bucks 5 or 6 years ago, and now the prices have gone up, of course, but they haven't crossed the $100 mark in some places. I think Le Parfumé still has bottles of this for under 100. And so if you're interested in smelling some older designers that I wouldn't hype this. This is not something that I feel deserves to be hyped. But it is something that even though I would probably rather be wearing some of these fragrances I'm going to talk to you today about, I kind of force myself to wear stuff like this because ultimately I'll do a review. I'll talk about it some more. And, you know, I want to make sure that my nose continues to smell fragrances in my collection and doesn't just stick with the, you know, with a couple of them and leave an entire part of my collection out. So I will wear stuff like this, even though I prefer to wear some of the stuff from the 80s I'm going to show you today. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's get into the fragrances of 1980, and let's start with one that actually made my honey list yesterday from This Is Not a Top 10. And I'm going to show you, I've got 2 bottles. Anytime I have 2 bottles of something, you know I love it. This is the very first release from the house of Alain Delon, which is a famous French actor. And so this is technically a celebrity fragrance, maybe one of the best celebrity fragrances of all time. This is Alain Delon Classic. Now, this is the classic version, the newer one. This is the vintage before it actually said classic. Thank you, Anuj, for finding this for me. As you can see, I don't have a cap here, but I do have a cap here. But so what? You know, just having this juice is a revelation. And this is basically an amber fougere is what, oh God, it's what Fragrantica calls it. Oh, it's so good. It is fresh. It's bright. You know, it's Chris from Scentland would say it's optimistic. It's forward-looking. It's all that stuff. I get that. Totally get that from this fragrance because there's some of the most beautiful aldehydes in this fragrance, but it mixes instantly with those masculine notes from the year 1980. You know, 1980, there'll be some more fragrances you'll see here later. You're going to notice a trend. You're going to notice Artemisia. You're going to notice basil. You're going to notice pine, carnation, cinnamon. All that stuff is in here. Big oak moss. Honey. Honey in here is kind of fresh. I said yesterday L'Envol from Cartier has this fresh honey I don't really like as much. This is fresh honey. This is what L'Envol from Cartier wishes it was, in my opinion, because it has this beautiful, you know, bed of warm benzoin, amber, and tonka, but it never gets heavy. You know, this is a fragrance that I think could be worn all year round. This is a huge contender. If I ever had a signature scent, something like this or Margaret Man, which I wore yesterday during my honey video, you know, these two share the same DNA, if you will. This is a little bit fresher. Margaret Man harkens a bit to Givenchy Gentleman from 1974, but there's no patchouli. So imagine trying to create Givenchy Gentleman from 74 without the patchouli, and that's kind of an idea, at least, of what you'll get in Margaret Man. So as you can see, I love these type of fragrances. I feel so at home wearing them. The lavender in this is some of the best lavender I've ever smelled. You know, it is just, you know, it's a shame that stuff like this is discontinued and hard to find. I will do a comparison video because I heard a lot of talk whenever I went on Fragrantica or Base Notes that some people said, oh, if you have the classic, You know, it's crap. It's nothing like the original. And you can see there is differences in the juice color. But I will do a comparison video one day between these two once I've had a chance to really wear them more and compare and contrast and take notes and stuff like that. There are differences, but I would say if you can't find this bottle, and if it wasn't for Anuj, I would have been one of these people that could not have found this older bottle. You know, sometimes you just got to grab what you can. And so keep that in mind is what I would say. If you love the fragrance and you want to experience, there's nothing wrong with grabbing the one that says classic. This distributor who did these older fragrances, their name is Waruska and Joel. They did a good job on reformulations. They reformulated Basil Uomo as well, and I thought they did a fantastic job on that one as well. So, you know, they're kind of like, to me, the old school Inter Parfums. Everything I've run across from this Waruska and Joel, they seem to have done a very good job, to my nose anyway. So that is Alain Delon Classic. Check this out, especially if you like honey, fragrances with the note of honey and heavy oak moss, and it's so good. I feel so at home wearing fragrances like this. Okay, now we're gonna move on to a fragrance that I really wish I had a full bottle of. I love this fragrance. This is another one that could easily be considered a signature scent. It's much heavier than Alain Delon, and actually Rich Mitch beat me to getting a full bottle of this from Moudesir by one day. I sent him the link and he instantly grabbed this. And it was a good move by him because I was going to get the full bottle if he didn't. But this is a fragrance by Balenciaga called Portos. And this came out in 1980, of course. If it didn't come out in 1980, it wouldn't be on this list. I don't know why I keep saying that, like I have some sort of a tick. But I couldn't find the perfumer, but I can tell you that this fragrance is right up my alley of things that I love. It's leathery, it's smoky, it has these resins, it has this beautiful, you know, a Papanax myrrh thing going on with labdanum and incense, and it's dirty. There's cumin in the top. Oh, it's amazing. And again, Artemisia in the top with galbanum and carnation, old school carnation, which was also in the Alain Delon. Old masculines used to have a lot, that note of carnation. And then it was like all of a sudden in the, you know, mid 90s, the switch flipped and carnation was just verboten. It was taken away instantly. And I love that old note of carnation in some of these fragrances. There's geranium, which gives this a slight, you know, it's such a heavy fragrance. I don't want to say soapy feel, but it gives it a slight clean feel underneath everything because this is a heavy fragrance. And it's dirty and it's masculine. And, you know, if you go on to, I think Fragrantica and look at the comparisons, they compare this to Koros, which this is not. The only thing that's comparable to Koros is it has an animalic accord. Koros has civet, this has castoreum, and this and a couple others coming up later use that castoreum, labdanum in a way to build this leather accord. And I love the way that they did that in the 1980s. This is full bottle worthy for me, hands down, no questions asked. If I ever found a full bottle of this at a respectable price without being gouged by the eBay bandits, I would totally pick this up without thinking. This is a revelation in men's perfumery to me, and this is before Koros. This is before Antaeus, and this is a decade before Balenciaga Portom, which was another revelation in men's fragrances. But Balenciaga, as you can see, they weren't just sitting on their hands. It's just nobody talks about this. And it's a, you know, not nobody, obviously. I heard about it from somewhere. I forgot where I heard about it from. Or maybe I heard about it when I saw Moudesir had it and I looked it up and went, my God, I have to try that. I don't remember how I got to learning about this. but I don't hear people talk about this. Obviously, vintage fragrances are not everyone's cup of tea, but if you're into them, like, Rich Mitch and I are into vintage fragrances, this is one that must go on the radar. Must sniff. At least put it on your to sniff list. It's so good. And I wish I had more than a little 10 ml mini, but there you go. Hopefully you guys can procure a full bottle if you're looking for it. Now we go on to a green fragrance, which I have to admit, this is not my favorite fragrance. It's a fragrance that's compared to another fragrance that I have a full bottle of. So I have a full bottle of both of these, and neither of them are really 100% my thing, but I keep them around because I like to continually go back to them, and maybe one day it'll really click. But this is Jacques Bogart, and this is One Man Show. I think it was Le Egoiste who said that the name of One Man Show just always kind of gave him a bad connotation, if you will. A man sitting all alone by himself, one man show. But it's basically this extremely green, alien green fragrance. It's got any green note you think of it, it has. It has basil, it has artemisia, it has galbanum, it has pine, it has big oak moss. There's a leather note underneath it all, but the greenness, there's castoreum, of course. This is a modern bottle. I've never been able to find a vintage, but Jacques Bogart keeps their fragrances in such good condition that I never really felt the urge to, if you know what I mean. Plus, the fragrance that this is compared to is called Krizia Uomo, and I have a full bottle of that, and that's another one that I just kind of, it's just so green, and it is it's almost like entering into like a museum of sorts, or science exhibit. You go in there and you look around and you kind of see things, and you're like, oh, that's interesting how they did that. But it's just not something I love. I love this. I love Alain Delon, the original. This is not a pure love for me, but as you can see, I like to study perfume. And so even though this isn't a love, I had to get a bottle, especially since I only paid less than 30 bucks or something for 100 ml. I can spray it, I can study it, I can go back to it, and who knows, maybe in a couple years, this will go from a meh to a like or a love. That has happened before. Your nose does change. It's just this, the animalic castoreum and oak moss in the base, those notes I usually love. It's the ultra green notes that aren't really rounded out by anything else. Like Polo Green from a couple years earlier used the note of tobacco to round this out. There's no tobacco in this. There is some spices, but I just feel it's buried underneath that basil, artemisia, galbanum, pine, if you will. The green just really takes hold and drives the car on this one. But if you are a green lover if you're a fragrance lover that loves green notes, check this one out. One Man Show, and it's cheap as chips. 20 or 30 bucks, you can get yourself 100 ml. Okay, now one that I actually have a vintage bottle on the way. So I'm not a big fan of this, but I'm curious if it's the formulation. I wasn't a big fan of Caron's Pour Homme, which came out in 1934 as a big lavender vanilla combo. Lavender vanilla musk, I believe. And I'm curious because I ended up liking the vintage. The current formulation of that I thought was crap. So this is the current formulation of Jacomo de Jacomo by Jacomo. And it's just the smoke in this, the burnt tire smoke accord, I really struggle with. This is considered to be an aromatic fougere. Christian Matthew was the nose. I don't know who that is. There's the very first fragrance on Fragrantica is this bottle with a fire kind of burning in front of it, and it's sitting behind the fire, and it looks like the flames are engulfing it. That's exactly what you get. Imagine if you threw this bottle with this cheap plastic into the fire and let it burn and smelled what became of the metal and the plastic burning. That's what this reminds me of. And it's just, yes, it's very abrasive, and it's in your face, and it's loud, and, you know, all that stuff. And usually those kind of fragrances don't offend me. This one does. I just don't, it doesn't come together. It seems very screechy. It seems very, it just seems very rough and very unrefined, which is nothing wrong with if your nose is okay with handling something like that. For me, it just put me off. I don't like wearing this. And I'm very curious once I get the older formula to do a comparison video and see if, you know, I can come around to the vintage, or if this has changed or lost something, or maybe it was just a bad reformulation or what. But the notes are cloves, oak moss, cinnamon, lavender, basil, musk, rosemary, cardamom, Brazilian rosewood, amber, geranium, cedar, cumin, galbanum, cypress, iris, sage, cyclamen, grapefruit, and lime. I will say that it's really the first hour or two that is really tough on this one, and then once you get into the later dry down, it does get better on Jacomo de Jacomo. But the bottle with the blue writing on it, the vintage, I'm just very interested in getting it in and compare. I'll do a comparison video once I get the vintage in. It's on the way. So that'll probably be in a couple weeks. So that is Jacomo de Jacomo by Jacomo. And then we're going to go to one of my favorite fragrances of all time. And I have the correct version to show you guys too. This is compared to some of my all-time favorite fragrances. It's compared to Santos de Cartier and Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme and Antaeus and stuff like that. This is Oscar de la Renta Pour Louis. And this is the Sanofi version, which is exactly what you want. If you can find that Sanofi version, get it, because the oak moss is amped up in this. It's basically 1980s just in a bottle to me. This is just so 1980s. I love everything about it. It is a beautiful aldehydic top. It's so good. All those manly notes that I was telling you about show up in this fragrance. There is a little bit of lavender, old school lavender in this that mixes with the basil, caraway, galbanum, sage, anise, and then there's old school carnation again, which I love, patchouli, cinnamon, cedar, geranium, vetiver, cyclamen, leather, oak moss, labdanum, sandalwood, musk. Now, if you start comparing notes, there's a lot of notes that are in these two fragrances that are alike, but they're completely different. That's what is so amazing about some of these old school fragrances to me. They all have a ton of notes, but it's how the perfumer constructed it and what gets highlighted. And in this, they really did a better job highlighting the leather and labdanum and oak moss. And I just enjoy wearing this so much more. I'm so comfortable wearing this fragrance, just like I'm so comfortable wearing Antaeus, Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme. These are my all-time favorite fragrances. The modern formulation is okay, but if you can do what I did and pay an extra 30 bucks, and instead of spending 30 bucks on, what is this, 60 ml? This is a 60 ml splash. If you can spend 60 bucks or 70 bucks, get the vintage, get the Sanofi. Trust me, you will thank me. The ingredients are better. There hasn't been a reformulation. You know, the new one smells okay, but this will blow your socks off, especially if you like vintage masculines. That's Oscar de la Renta Pour Louis. And it comes in all different sizes. You'll see 30 ml, 60, 90, 100. But the Sanofi one is the one that you want. Okay, next we're going to move on to A very hard to find fragrance right now. I count my lucky stars that I was able to grab this bottle when I did a couple years ago. I think I bought it from England even, actually. Can't remember exactly who the seller was. And this is a reformulated bottle, and I don't care. I'm just happy to have it. If you can even find the vintage bottle, which has a cap that looks like a piece of wood, but horizontal, like it goes horizontal across the bottle, and instead of this silver cap, it's a completely different bottle too. Get it? This is called Macassar by Rochas. This is the Incredible Hulk. To me, this is green, but this is not the Incredible Hulk. To me, this is the Incredible Hulk. Macassar is this one of the most amazing green leather animalic patchouli type fragrances that you will smell. There's also a beautiful pine note in this, so it stays green, but the way that it mixes the leather accord in, it's a beast. There's that insane coconut note listed on Fragrantica. I swear there's not a coconut in this. This is all green, masculine leather. It's so good. I'm just so sad that it's hard to find. There's also a tobacco leaf accord in here, I believe. Here, it's a tester, so I will read you the notes. Let's see here. We've got top notes of laurel, artemisia, head notes of tobacco flower, so not tobacco leaf, tobacco flower, geranium, and then base notes of sandalwood, guaiacum, which I guess is maybe guaiac wood, I'm not sure, and Macassar woods. I'm not sure exactly what Macassar woods are, and that note listing differs greatly from the note listing on Fragrantica. But I will tell you that if you like leather fragrances and you want to smell a leather unlike anything you've ever smelled, a green, almost, it almost has this astringent leather type, this almost like the leather was tanned in some sort of pine oil and left out in the sun kind of thing. It's an insane fragrance. So masculine, but it's so good. This is one for the ages. It's a shame that I think this is an early 2000s bottle, if I'm not mistaken. And then they discontinued it, of course. But if you can, the older bottles are even harder to find. If you can find one of those older bottles, it looks almost like this pudgy round bottle with a horizontal wood cap across the top. If you can find that, that's a holy grail. But I'm just happy to have a bottle of it, period. Okay, and then we're gonna go on to a Dior. If you know what's coming, you know. This is another, all of these, you'll notice some of my favorites are either heavy towards the honey or heavy towards the leather. Two of my favorite notes. That's what I love about this time period so much. So this is from the year 1980, of course. This is a vintage splash bottle of Christian Dior Jules. And Jules was created by a perfumer who made my father's signature scent. He created Paco Rabanne pour Homme in 1973, and he created this in 1980, and those were the only two masculines that I believe he created. I think he created Azzaro's Parfums Loris for women in 1975 in between these two, but I don't think he made anything else, if I'm not mistaken. His name is Jean Martel, and this is an unbelievable perfume right here, especially the vintage. It's so green at the top. The Artemisia in this might be the best Artemisia note I've ever smelled in perfumery. And I'm not the biggest Artemisia fan, but the way that it's done here, I just get this mentholated Artemisia note at the top that just blows me away. And then, of course, there's a floral heart. Bigger floral heart than you would imagine. Carnation, rose, jasmine, cyclamen. There's this heavy cedar and sandalwood that mixes with this oak moss, leather, and then balsam fir combo underneath. It's so amazing. Chris from Scentland actually put this as his #1 leather fragrance of all time in a countdown he did a few years back. I wouldn't call it my #1 leather of all time, but it's definitely up there. I think I prefer the next one a little bit more. Again, personal taste. It's like, do you like Larry Bird? Do you like Michael Jordan? Do you like Magic Johnson? You know, pick your choice of Hall of Fame ball players. That's what we're talking about here. You know, pick your choice of Hall of Fame perfumers, and there's 2 more Hall of Famers coming up, and that's why I love the year of 1980 so much. I mean, we're talking about some of my favorite leathers. The only thing that could cap this off is if we also included the year of 1981. Then you get even some more big hitters in. But let's go to the next one. I prefer the next one a little bit more than Jules. Again, just personal opinion. I'm sure a lot of people will think I'm nuts for saying this, but this is from Ron Winograd. He is the perfumer also for 3 or 4 of some of my favorite masculines, and this is one of them. This is Leonard Homme. Now, I only have 2 25 ml bottles. I only have 50 ml worth of juice. For one of my favorite fragrances of all time, I wish I had a bigger bottle, but there you go. I do have 2 of these, and this is a, oh, God. This is a master class in how to create a leather note, in my opinion. The way that they have used the castoreum and the labdanum, this amberiness, to create the leather in the base of this just makes my skin crawl. It's so good, it gives me chills. I love this fragrance so much. This is one of my favorite leather fragrances, up there with the best leathers you can think of, to me, because it's executed in a way that I love. It might not be in most people's top perfumes because most people probably won't appreciate this fragrance because it is very old school. It smells like a man who, you know, has been around the block, traveled the world, seen things, you know, experienced things. You know, you can't teach experience, right? You could be you could be a 20-year-old millionaire, but if you've never been around and you've never seen the way people will react to you, you've never seen the world, you've never seen the sights, you know, how can you describe the Sistine Chapel to someone like that that's never seen it, right? That's what this fragrance reminds me of. It reminds me of someone who's been there, who's done that, who's, you know, experienced some of the sweet things that life has to offer, but also suffered some losses and defeats along the way, but kept going. That's what this fragrance is to me, which sounds completely insane for a fragrance. You know, it just reminds me of a man in a 3-piece suit who knows who he is, and you know, he faces the world head on, and that's just who he is because the world made him that way. But he's also been around the block and seen things, and that is Leonard Homme. It's the leather in the base that does it for me. Oh, it's so good. The leather in the base of this, the castoreum base of this, smells very similar to the late dry down in Promise to me. Promise has a synthetic castoreum note in the base that after that crazy top, which was beautifully designed, by the way. I think that's a Dominique Ropion. He created this amazing top, but once it all burns off, 6, 7, 8 hours in, you start to smell the leather castoreum in Leonard Homme. You get that same underlying, you know, the driver of that fragrance. It smells, it's completely insane just to say that, but that's what I get. And Fragrantica says there's a carrot note in here. I don't get a carrot note at all. But there is a beautiful old school carnation with marjoram in the top. It's so good. So good. If you're a leather lover and you like some of these old school leathers like this, or this, or if you like Antaeus, you know, if you like leathers like that, you have to check out Leonard pour Homme. And the best thing about this fragrance is that no one talks about it, so it's cheap. You can still get this for 30 bucks. You can get this 25 ml bottle for less than $1 per ml right now if you look around. Absolute steal to experience perfumery on this level. So Leonard pour Homme, I really need to get a bigger bottle, but there we are. And then we're gonna go to the star of our show. You guys have never seen this bottle before, I don't think. But I have shown it off on Eugene's stream once a long time ago before I had my own channel, and I joined his stream once. This is Patou pour Homme EDT. Now, this is a tester, okay? This is, well, take a look at the back of the bottle, by the way. Look at the notes, okay? So you've got vetiver, you've got cedar, and what's that say? Santal de Mysore. Real Mysore sandalwood in this. I don't know what Sarge Scleri is or Piment. But I do know that the Mysore sandalwood in this gives it the most lovely, creamy aspect. There's a leather in the base that comes out. You know how the leather in the base in Guerlain's Derby is there, but it's not the star of the show. You have to kind of search for it. That's what the leather in Patou pour Homme reminds me of. It's this beautiful aromatic. I'm guessing piment is pimento seeds in the top, because you do get this pimento seed note in the opening with beautiful peppery lavender. It's amazing. One of the greatest creations of all time, and the reason that everyone sings the praises of Jean Carlio, the perfumer of Patou pour Homme, to high heaven, is because of the fact that he was a big fan of using real Mysore sandalwood and heavy oak moss. And this also has a civet note in the base, which I wouldn't, you know, if I didn't know, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you that there is civet in the base of this. You know, it's there, but it's kind of creating something that is more than the sum of its parts, if you will. It adds a little bit of mystery. I wouldn't have a problem wearing this in most weathers, even the heat. Maybe not the high heat of summer, but this is a signature scent all year round. Just like I was saying, Alain Delon is a signature scent. And just like I was saying, you know, Oscar de la Renta Pour Louis is a signature scent. You know, these fragrances are some of the all-time classics. And if you love perfumery, you have to understand these. You have to know them. You have to get samples if you don't want to. You know, this is obviously going on eBay for $1,000 a bottle. So this is 40 ml. So, you know, it's a $400 bottle right now. Now, if you don't want to spend $400 on just a little bit of juice, get a small sample. But learn the past. Learn what came in the past so you can know whether, when you're smelling something new, whether it's unique or whether it's just a shyster trying to sell you, you know, a recreated masterpiece from the past in a flashy bottle. That's it. I mean, otherwise you would never know. You would smell something new for $1,000, and if you've never smelled this, they could put something like this, you know, in a bottle and sell it to you. You'd think it's the greatest thing of all time. You wouldn't know that they ripped off someone else's work, right? And so that's why it's important to also learn perfume history if you're big into this hobby. And that's what learning about these fragrances does. And then on top of that, you come to find out that the ingredients were better in the past. The blend was better. The time that the perfumer made, took 5 years to make this instead of a month, and then just put it into a computer and chunked it out. There were time, effort, blood, sweat, tears that went into these fragrances from the perfumers. It was an amazing time, the past of perfumery. And pretty soon, these bottles are going to be even more and more and more rare. So think about somebody that comes along 10 years from now, 15 years from now. Are they going to get to experience some of this stuff? And so we have to count ourselves very lucky that we can still smell and appreciate some of these masterpieces from the past. And these are, this Macassar, Jules, Alain Delon, Oscar de la Renta pour Louis, and Leonard pour Homme and Portos I consider masterpieces. All of these I consider masterpieces except for these two, and I don't take that lightly. These two to me are but I'm going to get the vintage and see. I'm going to compare. And so, 1980, a very special year. I hope you guys have appreciated this. I hope you've taken something of value from it. And I hope you get your nose on some of these. If you've never smelled some of these fragrances, please do. We're really hitting the stride of this year in perfumery is starting now. 81 is even more amazing. 82 is amazing, and it just snowballs from there. So thanks for watching. If you have experience with some of the other fragrances from 1980 that I don't have in my collection, please let me know. I'm always interested in learning more. And cheers. We'll see you guys again later. Bye-bye.